creating menus and navigation. And our first video is going to be about navigation patterns and best practices. Now in this video we are going to find out what are navigation elements, what are some of the navigation patterns that can be found on the web, what does it mean when people say user experience, and finally how can Bootstrap help us with navigation. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. The first example is going to be from the Bootstrap website. And I didn't zoom in because, again, I'm going to be showing you the responsive version of this. So for now, as you can see, we do have a top navigation right here. It is probably the most common standard to have the navigation at the top of your website. Some websites make it a floating top navigation, some have a floating bottom navigation, but in general this is probably the most common pattern you see, where you have what is called a nav bar and you have a bunch of links and here a form. Now, one of the navigation patterns that Bootstrap offers when you're using responsive design, or even if you want to use the same approach on desktop, which I definitely don't recommend, would be the hamburger menu. So if we enter the responsive design view for Firefox, you see that this navbar actually becomes quite small and it has this hamburger icon. Now if you click on the icon, the navigation or the menu expands, showing you all its options. Now of course it wouldn't be possible to fit all of these elements on a mobile phone, and that's why our first approach that comes default with Bootstrap would be the hamburger menu. Now of course you can use the hamburger menu on the desktop version if you will, and if you want to hide all of this and make the user click to get to the menu, which again some people do, that is fine, but I don't recommend it because you shouldn't make the user click multiple times to get to something that should be as obvious and as simple as possible. So our first navigation pattern would be the hamburger menu. And again, you can easily use it in Bootstrap 4, even Bootstrap 3. Our next pattern is going to be what is known as scrolling menu. So here, as you can see, we have a bunch of these categories, if you will, on this very nice Bootstrap template. And again, if we enter the responsive design mode, you now see that you only see a portion of these categories, and that's because you can now scroll left or right to view all of them. This is another navigation pattern which again comes with Bootstrap by default, and it allows you to quickly scroll left and right to get to the content that you want. Again, this might be more convenient in some cases because the user doesn't have to click, but sometimes it's not as obvious as you would think to indicate to the user that he can scroll. In this case, you see that the word see is actually placed very, very well, so that on a mobile phone like an iPhone or something like that, the last available category at least starts with one letter. So that's our second navigation pattern, and again it comes default with Bootstrap 4. Our last Bootstrap navigation pattern is going to be something that is called the off-canvas menu. Now this is very popular both on desktop versions of the website and mobile versions of the website. So as you can see, we have our navbar again. And again, this is a Bootstrap example. So if we enter the responsive design mode, you now see that we have actually two navbars. One is this off-canvas navbar, which has the hamburger icon, and the second one is actually the scrollable example that we saw before. So this is kind of a combination of multiple navigation patterns, and again this depends on your usage, but in this case it actually makes sense. So if you press on the menu item, you do get the off-canvas navbar. And off-canvas means it kind of swoops in from left or right or even top to bottom, and it takes over the whole screen. So essentially you're seeing only the navigation. Sometimes what's clumsy is there's this scroll bar that gives you the idea that you can scroll, but you actually can't. you're actually scrolling the website behind it. So that's one problem that you might have with this menu, but otherwise it is a neat trick and a very popular pattern to include on your website. And again, all of these patterns that I'm showing you are mostly related to responsive websites or responsive design. If you do, however, wish to include any of these patterns, like a hamburger menu, like off-canvas menu, into the desktop version, of course you can. But again, like I said, it doesn't make much sense that on the desktop version, I, for example, see this huge off-canvas menu that covers the whole page while I'm looking at it. So when it comes to navigation, it's a matter of what your needs are in terms of content and how to organize everything to work great both on desktop and on the mobile web. I'm going to show you an example from my company's new website that we are still building out, so please be very gentle. So as you can see, we have this bottom menu bar. And some people might argue that it's not the best position for the menu bar because people are usually used to seeing a menu bar or nav bar somewhere at the top. But in this case, I think it works great in terms of the contrast with the content. But more importantly, as you can see, we have a few options. So we have the first item in the menu is who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And of course, let's talk. So if we take a look at how we have solved this menu on a mobile phone, you'll see that it's actually a pretty neat trick. So instead of hiding the menu and making the user click to get to a menu or using the scroll bar to get it, what we actually did is we're actually hiding parts of the menu items and only showing what we want. So in this case, we're showing who, what, how, and let's talk. So if we take a look at how this might look on a bigger screen, again, you get the full sentence on desktops and devices that are long enough, but on your mobile phone, you would get only a few words. So this is a very non-standard navigation pattern that we chose, but I think it works for us and it kind of gives a new, fresh idea on the menu bar. So again, this is all up to you. All I would tell you is don't make the user do a lot of things, a lot of clicks, a lot of scrolling, a lot of hovering to get to the content on your website. Make it as obvious and painless as possible. And finally, if you do want to read up on some navigation patterns, I have a great article on Smashing Magazine from 2017 called A Brief Overview of Responsive Navigation Patterns. And this article will give you all the details that you need on some of the most common navigation patterns that we can find on the web, and more importantly, why some of them are good or why some of them are bad.